The next delegation is Tamara Brown, Rock City Wetland Development. Ms. Brown, you know the drill. If you 5 minutes, introduce yourself for the record. I'll let you know when there's a minute left, please.
Tamara Brown. Thank you for having me here tonight.
I was going to say, speak into the mic so we can hear you.
Oh, yes, this mic. And the green button to forward the slides. Yes? I'm a resident of Nanaimo and a mother who cares deeply about my community and environment. I'm here today in my personal capacity. The project at 3400 Barrington Road is a proposed 6-story, 102-unit apartment building immediately beside the Rock City wetland. Construction would remove approximately 437 trees and involve extensive bedrock blasting beside what is now believed to be an exceptionally rare peatland ecosystem. Since the development permit was approved in January 2026, important new ecological information has emerged, and questions remain about whether the applicable provincial framework was identified and applied before the project was approved. I'm here because I believe this new information warrants pausing any further disturbance of the site until it has been independently reviewed. Since approval, the province has indicated the wetland likely contains a rare, potentially red-listed fen ecosystem. New information has also emerged regarding hydrological connectivity, riparian protection, species of conservation concern, and downstream fish habitat. Several independent reviews are now underway. One of my concerns relates to the riparian areas protection regulation, or RAPR. RAPR applies when development is proposed near streams providing fish habitat. The environmental assessment identifies hydrologically connected wetland features leading to fish habitat, Cottle Creek Watershed. The environmental assessment and the city's own mapping identify a hydrologically connected system leading towards fish habitat. That raised one question for me. Where in the public record was it determined whether the smaller wetland and its seasonal creeks met the provincial definition of a stream under RAPR? If that exists, where can council and the public find it? A fen takes a millennia to form. Removing 437 trees and blasting bedrock beside this wetland could permanently alter its hydrology. Those changes cannot simply be undone. I should be snuggling my 4-year-old and nursing my 17-month-old to sleep right now. But instead, I find myself here with you fine folks advocating for a place that could be celebrated as an ecological crown jewel of Nanaimo. I respectfully ask Council for 2 things. Apply the precautionary principle and pause further work while this new information is independently reviewed. Second, explain why the smaller hydrologically connected wetland and its seasonal creeks were not assessed under RAPR, and what the city intends to do in light of the new significant information that has emerged since of approval. Thank you for your consideration this evening.
Thank you very much. Please. Councillor Bruno, do you have a question for the delegation?
No, not for the delegation, Your Worship. However, thank you so much for the presentation, but I have a question for staff.
Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Can you explain what has changed specifically since a previous council originally approved the rezoning for 3400 Barrington Road?
Certainly. It's a lot to fit into 5 minutes, and I have a lot to say on the topic. Since January 2026, I've learned 4 important things about this site. Firstly, the province of BC's Conservation Data Centre conducted a site assessment and concluded the wetland is likely a poor fen, a peat-forming ecosystem that may represent an exceptionally rare ecosystem within the coastal Douglas fir zone. That information was not available when the development permit was approved. Second, I've learned much more about the ecological importance of the site. The Toth report identifies the smaller wetland as an amphibian breeding pond and rates northern red-legged frog, Rana aurora, habitat as high. 1 second. Since approval, residents have also documented species of conservation concern, including the northern red-legged frogs and olive-sided flycatchers. The provincial Develop with Care guidance recognizes that pond breeding amphibians depend on surrounding terrestrial habitat, not just the pond itself. It recommends at least a 30-meter buffer around breeding ponds and up to 60 meters for species of conservation concern, such as the northern red-legged frog. Third, I've learned more about the site's hydrology. The environmental assessment acknowledges the smaller wetland drains into the larger wetland, which forms part of the headwaters of Cottle Creek watershed. Since approval, additional resident observations, LiDAR analysis, and city GIS information have further clarified hydrological connectivity. After reviewing the provincial framework, I questioned whether the smaller hydrologically connected wetland and its seasonal drainage features were assessed under wrapper. I have not been able to locate that analysis in the public record. Finally, after reviewing the city's responses to my questions, I realized many of the concerns about groundwater, amphibian habitat, and riparian protection were answered by referring back to the same environmental assessment that is now the subject of an independent professional complaint. That reinforced my view that an independent review is appropriate before irreversible work proceeds. I acknowledge the city requires setbacks, a covenant, engineering standards, and leaf strips. My concern is whether those protections remain sufficient in light of the new information that has emerged since approval. Taken together, that's why I'm here tonight. I'm asking Council to apply the precautionary principle.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmer had a question for you. What's changed since the report was made? It's not an opportunity for you to repeat what you'd said earlier, but it's appreciated. Councillor Eastmer, another question?
That was a really comprehensive picture of what's changed since the original zoning was approved, so I appreciate that. I think I have some follow-up questions for staff.
We'll go through the questions to the delegation first and then to staff, if that's all right. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thanks. You brought up the wrapper a few times, and then also just that answer to Councillor Eastmer, and I'm just curious, like, what specifically are you concerned about in the application of wrapper or not, sort of in that secondary?
Absolutely. So just so everyone here understands, the riparian areas protection regulation, or what we call wrapper, is a provincial law that protects streams, wetlands, and fish habitat when development is proposed nearby. If it applies, a qualified environmental professional determines how much of that habitat needs to be protected. The province creates the framework, but the municipalities are responsible for implementing it when they review development applications. The environmental assessment says the smaller wetland drains into the larger wetland, which forms the Cottle Creek, part of the Cottle Creek watershed, and connects to downstream fish habitat. That raised a straightforward question for me. Did the city follow the provincial process for determining whether the smaller wetland and its seasonal creeks should be assessed under wrapper? Again, like I said before, from the records I reviewed, the city appears to rely on the water bodies that are already shown on its mapping. The province protects water based on what it is, not whether it's already drawn on a municipal map. It looks at the actual characteristics of the water body and whether it's connected to fish habitat. My concern is that I haven't been able to identify a city process for evaluating unmapped water bodies that may still qualify under the provincial rules. If that framework exists, I'd genuinely like to see it. If it doesn't, I think it's reasonable to pause before irreversible work proceeds and make sure the correct provincial framework was identified and applied. This matters beyond this one project. If there's no clear process for considering unmapped qualifying water bodies, then the question is how those features are evaluated in future developments across Nanaimo. Ultimately, this is about making sure the right process was followed before irreversible work begins beside a likely rare peatland ecosystem. If questions about the process remain, they should be answered before the damage becomes permanent.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. No further questions for the delegation. Thank you very much. Oh,
Follow
sorry.
up with staff.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, and thank you for the delegation. Have you reached out to the developer about your concerns?
I have not yet. My focus has been ensuring that the relevant information is available to decision makers and regulatory bodies. If council thinks it's recommended, I can certainly do that.
No, I'm just curious whether whether you know who the developer is and whether you've reached out to them or not. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions for the delegation? Not seeing any. Councillor Perino, then Councillor Eastmere. Questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And a question through you to Mr. Lindsay or whoever Mr. Lindsay feels.
Yes, you may.
Okay. If I could ask our CAO, Mr. Lindsay, obviously we depend upon our staff and the information that we receive when making these applications go ahead. I'm wondering if you could give some clarity to what the issue is here and to what Ms. Brown talked about.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Holm and Mr. Bridges are with me this evening, and I'll pass it over to them to answer the questions. But I would say it's not only staff reviewing, but it's following the provincial process that's set up, which requires qualified environmental professionals to review wetlands that are either on our mapping or not on our mapping. But I'll turn it over to our staff who know far more about this to answer your question.
Thank you. So just looking for clarity on this. I mean, this development and around that area has been going on for many years. So I just wanted clarity on what Ms. Brown talked about and the issues that she presented and the environmental concerns.
Sure.
Please.
Sure, thank you, and through your worship to Councillor Perino. So clarity on everything that was discussed. I mean, there was a lot to unpack there, but main issues with respect to, and I've Kevin Bridges, Mr. Bridges is with me. He's a qualified environmental professional as well, staff, and has worked on developments like this for many decades with the city. So a number of issues were identified. One was the process for identifying non-mapped watercourses. So the city, just a bit of background, the city adopted to implement the riparian area protection regulations at the time, the riparian area regulations. In the early 2000s, the city adopted a meet or beat approach. The city had watercourse protection measures in place for many decades, since the 1990s at least, prior to the riparian area regulations and then the subsequent riparian area protection regulations. That's why you'll see that this water body was identified, the larger wetland was identified in the city's mapping system, and already provided setbacks that would meet or beat the provincial requirement. The smaller wetland was not identified as a wetland that was that the riparian area regulations apply to, and if it would be the QEP, the Qualified Environmental Professional, that would assess the water body to determine whether or not the riparian area regulations apply.
Okay.
And it has to do, Mr. Bridges can explain in more detail, but it has to do with whether or not they're interconnected by surface flow. In this case, the smaller wetland is not. So if you'd like clarity, Mr. Bridges can speak to that. There have been a number of assessments done on the water bodies that we're discussing, and downstream water courses into Cottle Creek as well. There have been changes over time. I mean, it's a dynamic world as well. Water courses change. In the case of the larger water course, it was actually the larger wetland was not at one point connected by surface flows to Cottle Creek. Changes were introduced. You can imagine Rock City Road went in at some point. There's drainage improvements there. Ocean Pearl Terrace and Barrington Road. There's been development over decades, as you've referenced, Councillor Perino, in the area, that has resulted in some changes in drainage flows, has resulted, my understanding, in the larger wetland now being connected by surface flow to Cottle Creek. The riparian area protection regulations do apply to the larger wetland. They're protected by the city's framework, which includes a development permit area requirement as well as setbacks within the zoning bylaw. The proposed development complies with the city's framework, with the city's requirements. The QEP assessed the developer's qualified environmental professional, assessed the water bodies according with the city's guidelines, and provided the information required to review and approve the development. There is, as mentioned, there's opportunity for independent challenge through the College of Applied Biology to the professionals' information submitted, and I understand that process is underway. But from the city's perspective, from staff perspective, the QEP is a registered professional, appropriately qualified, and provided the information required to address the city's guidelines, and it was accepted accordingly. Thank you.
And all of the provincial regulations were taken into account and
Yes, and in fact, Mr. Bridges can speak to this better, but there were references to the develop with care. The province puts out often guidelines, guidance, but there's really not a lot of regulatory teeth at the provincial and federal level. The city has, like I said, since the 90s had a framework in place to protect watercourses, and that's evolved over time. There was fairly significant, I guess the last major upgrade was through city plan. The last major improvement to the city's watercourse protection framework was through city plan. As well, the city has mapped terrestrial and herbaceous environmentally sensitive areas which weren't identified as occurring on this property as well. There are, and should note too, there is, as council's aware, and members of the public maybe as well, as development progresses through various stages, details become clearer, more information's available, designs are refined, tightened up. There's still ongoing work, although a development permit's been approved. There's still work going on. The developer has engaged additional registered professionals, engineers, as well as another qualified environmental professional to review the design, the engineering design related to stormwater management, to review the project to confirm that sediment and erosion control measures are in place, to do additional survey work with respect to, I know there's been some concerns expressed around bird nesting, wildlife trees, those types of things. So there is additional work taking place through the civil design review and the building permit process, and there are additional qualified environmental professionals that are supporting that work with information that's required by staff to review. And as I mentioned, Mr. Bridges as well is a qualified environmental professional.
So we're still hoping for more work to be done. Is that correct, Mr. Bridges? Is that something?
Through your worship, as from the discussions I've had with Mr. Holmes, what he has just mentioned is happening. We have had some discussions with the province around different aspects of this project. We are applying all the provincial legislation that is required to be applied at this stage. There's just some discussion with regards to wrapper and the larger wetland, not so much with the smaller one. Understanding the riparian area protection regulation and when it applies and doesn't apply is sometimes very complicated. Has to do with two major things: is fish habitat or leads to fish habitat by surface connection, and the surface connection part is very tricky sometimes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock, then Councillor Manley.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The first is with regards to the application of the wrapper. I understand what we said earlier that it needs to be applied when there's surface water connection between water bodies to downstream fish habitat. And in the Toth report, it does say that that smaller pond is connected to the larger wetland. And I guess my question is that, yeah, how come wrapper wasn't applied like to that? And then I just in the correspondence, I was also surprised looking at our application. I don't know if it's in DPA 1 or what, that we don't require unmapped water bodies to qualify for the wrapper assessment, whereas like the RDN says mapped and unmapped wrappers to apply. And I'm curious about that discrepancy. That's the first time that I had seen that. And then just sort of the discrepancy whether this small wetland is connected or not. Thank you.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrick. So I think it's hydraulically connected, but not by surface flow, the small wetland to the large wetland. So Mr. Bridges can expand on that if you'd like. He's visited the property many times and can explain that subtlety. As far as unmapped watercourses, they are reviewed by a qualified environmental professional who would be responsible for determining whether or not the riparian area protection regulations would apply.
Right, so it falls back onto the QEP, the registered professional. So, but yeah, I guess the first one is just the discrepancy between surface flow or not, because it actually says in the QEP's report that it's seasonally connected by surface flow, and so it seemed like a contradiction into the.
Mr. Bridges.
So, through your worship, the Toth report, 2009, I believe 2009 report, it is connected. It does not say whether it is surface flow or not surface flow, but it is hydraulically connected between the small wetland and the large wetland. However, there is no surface flow channel there to, and where this matters is whether wrapper applies or not, is because if it is not connected by surface flow, then wrapper does not apply. That's nuances of the regulation. As far as your second part of that, to elaborate on what Mr. Holmes has said, through our development permit area guidelines and DPA 1 in the zoning bylaw, we require environmental assessments for many large projects prior to any development happening. And the purpose for that is to identify biologically significant areas and things that need to be protected. Just like this one was identified way back in 2009 and so on. If they're not already mapped on our system, the qualified environmental professional brings them to our attention, they get mapped on the system, and the environmental professional recommends a appropriate setback to protect that biological asset. And that would then be reviewed by myself and other staff to make sure that it complies with not only our regulations, but also the other regulations that are the federal and provincial regulations.
Right, okay, so the safeguard, what you're saying is basically the QEP then in our process will identify if something's unmapped, and then they will prescribe whatever they think is appropriate for that particular area, regardless of whether it would qualify or not. They make the determination. Do they do a wrapper assessment on it?
They wouldn't do a wrapper assessment on it if the wrapper didn't apply. So that would be the first thing they would do, would be looking at whether the wrapper would be applicable or not.
Okay. And then the follow-up question to that is, yeah, basically like, you know, I've been opposed to this development from the beginning because it looks like a very sensitive area, but since, you know, there's been more, you know, attention to it, there's been, you know, discrepancy around the amount of nesting and birds in the particular area that has been, you know, raised. There's been questions around, like, you know, we've protected like the border of the wetland, but are we protecting the actual hydrology around it that actually feeds the wetland? And then also raising the correspondence, and that is like around amphibian habitat, like the red-legged frog in that area and the setbacks for that. And I guess a lot rests on this look at the QEP report, and like say for example, it does get found that there were quite a lot of things that were missed in this third party look at this. Do we have any recourse as we get this new information, like, oh, there were a few things that should have been addressed? Do we have any way to pause the development and say we would like to get a hydrological assessment to look how this wetland is recharged, and if, you know, blasting the rock is going to affect the water into the site? If we do need more bird assessment, is there a way that we can pause and request these type of investigations? Like even hearing like that the provincial, the province habitat assessment are calling this, you know, a very rare fan. Like that's the first time that I've heard anything about this. And if somebody had raised that during the rezoning, I think all of council would have been like, oh man, if this is a really rare ecosystem, let's sort of be a little bit more trepidatious around this.
Councillor, there is a question.
Yeah, so the question is like, given all this information that potentially is new, are we able to pause this and request further investigation before we go ahead and like change it? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll speak to that through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrook. So no, there's not an ability to pause the development. The developer is working through a building permitting process and providing, I think what's important is additional information. The developer is working through the building permitting process and is providing, as I've mentioned earlier, additional information to address some of the concerns that that you've raised or that have been raised, as typically happens through development approvals process. So when it comes to nesting birds and you know, that it's important that, and surveys will take place prior to any clearing happening, and it's important, the time of year is obviously important to that, and the world changes over time. Conditions change. So there will be surveys undertaken immediately prior to any tree removal to address regulations around bird nesting, protection of, nesting birds, as well as with respect to the hydrology. There are, as I mentioned earlier, additional registered professionals that are working on the application. There are geotechnical engineers, civil engineers. There's another qualified environmental professional that are reviewing the and complying with the city's stormwater, reviewing the proposal to ensure that it complies with the city's manual of engineering standards and specifications, and to address the issues that you've identified and have been raised. As well, much of that information you can see if you look through at the time of rezoning. There are reports put forward by the professionals as suggesting what the issues are and how they might address them, and then those are refined through development permit and then building permit subsequently as they get into the details. So there's ongoing work, ongoing review and design by qualified professionals to address some of the things that you're speaking of. So hopefully that helps. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, Councillor Gusselbrock answered my list of questions, except I'm just curious about RAPR itself. Are there discrepancies between best practices and regulation? Like what really should happen and what is required under the law?
Through your worship to Councillor Manley. That's a double-barreled question in many ways. There are discrepancies between best management practices and what is legislated. Mm-hmm. For example, I can use a red listed species classification. Technically has no legislative protection through the province or through the federal government either. That being said, we do our best to make sure we use best management practices to protect those habitats to where those species may live. There are large challenges around that, and it's always a balance to be found between the protection of the significant ecological site, the developer's rights, the city's wants, there's multitudes of factors that get taken into consideration when we start looking at just trying to apply a straight across setback to something. The other thing that you have to take into consideration as well is topography in a lot of cases when you say, well, we need a 30-meter setback, for example, for an isolated wetland for the red-legged frog. Looking at topography and what forested habitat that frog would actually use in that specific location may not fit with a straight-up 30-meter setback. It might be 100 meters over there and 15 meters over there on the same wetland based on topography, based on bedrock outcrops, based on a lot of different things. So it's very, very challenging to just apply a straight-up 30-meter best management practice or whatever on a specific biological entity that's always somewhere moving around and fluid. And one big thing about it is one size doesn't fit all in these scenarios. So there's a lot to consider, and hopefully I've answered your question. Best management practice and legislature are two very different things.
Yeah, a lot of gray area. I'm just curious, the province has said that this is potentially or is a S1 red listed ecosystem. Is that an assessment that you would agree with?
Yes, and I think it was designated that right off the bat. It just wasn't called an S1 designation. That's something that's relatively new. It was identified as a pine bog way back in 2009, which is the classification it was given now. It's just been labeled something different. And it is a very rare ecosystem.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like, we have a lot of very rare ecosystems in this part of the world, and I think it'd be a shame to see this one destroyed. So I wasn't on council when this decision was made, but it appears that I have no decision point going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're on to 12, what was formerly C, which is now going to go first, which is Climate Hazard Assessment and Mapping Project. Ms. Bhopal Singh. And then Mr. Lloyd